Want to get to some breaking news tonight. U.S. stocks suffering their biggest loss since the war in Iran started. Take a look at this. Red across the board. The tech-heavy NASDAQ just dipped into correction territory, down 10% from its most recent high, all fueled, by the way, by rising oil prices and fears over when the war is going to end with Iran. The president now saying he's going to give Iran 10 more days to reopen the Strait of Hormuz or strike on their energy plants. That deadline was previously set to expire tomorrow, but the president still insists Iran is begging him to make a deal to end the war, even as Iranian leaders appear to dismiss it.
The reason they want to make a deal is they have been just beat to shit.
We've got team coverage on this. We got Matt Bradley, who's standing by for us in Tel Aviv. Want to start, though, with Monica Alba, who's posted up at the White House. Walk us through what we know about the president now extending this deadline beyond tomorrow. Have there been more developments in these talks between Iran and the United States via Pakistan? Where are we on this?
Yeah, all very fair questions, Yasmin. And the truth is that just a couple of hours ago, the president indicated that this deadline could be pushed back by a day, could be pushed back by more than that, could be pushed back indefinitely. And now he did just make that announcement about this at least being punted to April 6th. Remember that this started at the beginning of the week, then it was going to be for tomorrow. But this is all happening as there are these sort of dual track negotiations, you can call them, according to the special envoy Steve Witkoff, while the president and the defense secretary continue to say that they're sending more military, more assets, more service members to the region. So both of these things are sort of happening and raising this question, Yasmin, about whether things really are potentially winding down or whether they could be ramping up in a significant way. And we are hearing back from the Speaker of the Parliament of Iran, who is really saying that this is not the kind of negotiation structure that they feel they can engage in, where he is saying essentially that no one can impose any kind of ultimatum on Iran and Iranians. And he also writes that basically this has been a, quote, vicious cycle of war, ceasefire war, alluding to the fact that the president does seem to sort of indicate on any given day that this could go in either direction. Yasmin.
I want to talk also about a potential kind of fracture that we are seeing within the Republican Party. We know that there were tensions that had flared in a closed-door meeting between lawmakers in the House Armed Services Committee. And members of the Trump administration late last night as well were there. And normally, when you are, coming to the House Armed Services Committee and you're talking of war, usually you would get support when it comes to what's happening with Iran. And these are also, for the most part, Trump loyal folks, right? Are we potentially seeing a fracture here within the GOP when it comes to this war?
Well, what's interesting here, Yasmin, is that you are seeing some of the president's allies and Republicans and Democrats, too, who are basically saying they've been frustrated with all of the briefings that they've received so far from administration officials when it comes to the war against Iran. They don't feel like they're getting a complete picture of the strategy, according to four sources who told NBC News, who were a part of those briefings, that they also feel they're very concerned, maybe most concerned, about the possibility of boots on the ground. And even Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace wrote that after she was briefed on this on social media, that she's as concerned as ever about that possibility and wanted to be very clear that she is opposed in particular to sending boots on the ground to operate within Iran, which we know is still on the table. Yasmin.
All right, Monica Alba for us. Thank you, Monica. Appreciate it. I want to bring in Matt Bradley now, who's on the ground for us in Tel Aviv. Let's talk the Strait of Hormuz, Matt, because we are hearing now that Iran is now charging ships to cross the Strait of Hormuz. Do we know how this is happening? Do we know when this began and really kind of the significance of this move on the part of Iran?
Yeah, I'll start with the last question. I think the significance is just that this really just goes to show that not only are they able to block passage through the Strait of Hormuz, but they're so in control, and by them I mean the Iranians, so in control of the Strait of Hormuz, they're actually able to levy tariffs on those shippers who are trying to go through. Some of them are paying millions of dollars because, let's face it, that's how much a lot of this cargo is worth. That's how much it's worth to get these ships. Many of them have inventory, have cargo that they need to sell on the market by a certain time. That's how they get them out. And so the Iranians are are basically directing these ships to go through between different islands, hugging the Iranian coast. So this allows the Iranians not only to extract money, which they very much need, but also to regulate which ships are passing through the Strait of Hormuz. And apparently there's been about 24 of them who have actually paid and gone through the strait so far since the war began about a month ago. Now, this is something that it looks as though the Iranians are set to continue. Those people who are in the shipping industry are calling this basically the Tehran toll booth. That's one of the names they're giving to this. And this just goes to show that the Iranians are able to allow ships to go through, but they will do it on their terms and under their control.
Right, exercising their strength in a way, showing kind of the world, the community around them that they're the ones that are kind of allowing access and not allowing access during wartime. In this kind of joint operation between the United States and Israel on Iran, the U.S. has focused mainly and more so on going after strategic sites, right? Israel has focused more on going after the leaders, taking out, for instance, the top dog, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. We have now learned that Israel is saying that it has killed Iran's Navy chief. What more have we learned on that?
Yeah, well, the Israelis are saying that they were that the Americans would be satisfied to hear this. It almost sounds as though the Israelis were doing this at the behest of the Americans. Obviously, the priority for the Americans right now, more than anything else, is opening the Strait of Hormuz. And that is what we were told was the end game of killing this commander, that he was the man who had blocked the Strait of Hormuz, and that killing him would somehow be progress toward unblocking it. But it's unclear whether or not that's actually going to happen. This is a naval commander. He's not making the political decision to cut off the strait.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.